r/ask Reddit. What's the darkest secret you found out about a family member/relative? My mom and dad decided to take in my 3 cousins because their mom got into a horrible car accident. 2 girls and 1 boy. The girls were 6 and 10. The boy 12. Fast forward to when the 6-year-old girl is 14 years old and is asked about birth control. She starts sobbing saying her brother, the then 12 years old, took her virginity when she was 6 and that it continued until she was about 13. We had no clue. Found out the hard way that my grandfather was a sexual predator. Turns out my grandmother had been in denial despite both my aunts, their friends, and young girls in their small town claiming he raped molested them. One 16-year-old even got pregnant and he paid for the abortion. Grandma lied about his whereabouts activities for years to protect him because if he went to jail she'd be unable to afford their house. So, long story short, me and my then 10-year-old cousin were his latest and final victims. Thanks, Grandma. Sounds a lot like my grandfather. Nobody talks about it, but it was revealed on the night after his funeral that he raped at least 2 of his daughters and yep, grandmother stayed silent. He enjoyed a pristine reputation for his life and our utmost respect. Quite a minduck it was, discovering that he was a pedo. My uncle didn't have an aneurysm stroke spontaneously. Sorry, I'm not a doctor. He deliberately stopped taking his blood thinners. Dude was 63 with a wife, 4 kids and 15 grandkids, the oldest of which was 13 and the youngest was not even a year. He was just done. His wife doesn't know. His kids don't know. I only know cause I overheard the family doctor telling my dad. As far as I know, only myself, the doctor, and my dad know. As someone on blood thinners, this scares me. It's a reminder of how critical taking these meds every day for the rest of my life is. Stopping is disability at best, death at worst. I knew what I signed up for though. Beats having open heart surgery every 10 years. Jesus yo, what an awful way to go out. One of my aunts raised another aunt's baby as her own. My mom had 4 sisters and a brother, all of whom got married and had kids. So I have around 20 cousins. Unfortunately 3 of my aunts got breast cancer in their 30s. All 3 recovered, but years later the youngest, Maria, got it again and got it worse. Maria needed a bone marrow transplant. All her sisters and children got tested, but no one matched. The family then revealed that Maria had had a teenage pregnancy. Her first child was actually my cousin John, who had been adopted and raised by my oldest aunt as her second child. None of the cousins knew about this, including John and his revealed to be adoptive siblings. John was asked to get tested and was a match, so he agreed to donate bone marrow to his birth mom, Maria. John was in his late 20s at the time and had had very little contact with Maria over his life, so he is pretty cool. The transplant took, but Maria eventually succumbed a year or so later. Wow, that must have been a crazy roller coaster for him. My dad told me that, before my mom and dad broke up, he hadn't been happy with her for several years. My mother even had a miscarriage at one point, which destroyed the both of them, but he couldn't leave her, because he was afraid that she would hurt or even kill herself. So his only thought was to have a kid with her, so that motherly instinct would hopefully prevent her from killing herself. Are you the child that resulted? What a burden to have to carry. Well, the thing is, they both still wanted kids, so it's not that bad. The only problem was, my mom's body rejected my dad's sperm, meaning it wasn't easy to have me. With a lot of surgical help, they tried a total of 6 times in the hospital. The 3rd was a miscarriage, and the 6th was me, so they still went through hell to get me. Also, they broke up when I was 2, so I never really noticed anything, and the relationship between them has never been bad for me. I found out 2 years ago that my mother had a baby she gave up for adoption 18 months before she had me, and then had another baby when I was 3, and she also gave that baby up for adoption. All 3 of us have different fathers, and I think the only reason she kept me was because my father married her, but that marriage only lasted a year. My mother remarried when I was 5 and my half-brother was born when I was 7. As far as I knew, for 59 years he and I were our mother's only children. I never saw her pregnant with a second baby because she sent me to live with my great-grandparents across the country during her pregnancy. My mother and grandmother were the only people who knew about this, and they both took the secret to their graves. The only reason any of it was found out is because of all of the DNA testing people now do. This discovery really impacted my sense of identity for a while, my view of my mother, and our relationship. I've met my half-siblings, an older sister and younger brother. I like them and I'm glad I've been able to answer some of their questions, but the initial discovery really messed with me for a bit. I recently found out that my grandmother committed suicide as a result of the sexual abuse she received from her grandfather as a child, aged 14. Apparently her mother and many of her relatives were compliant with it and would even send her to his house for week-long visits where she would sleep in his bed. My biological grandfather threatened to kill my grandmother while she was very young and pregnant with my uncle. Long story short, he was engaged to someone else. My grandmother became a nervous wreck while pregnant and wouldn't leave the house, and he used to throw bricks through the window. Eventually she told some of her friends about what he'd threatened to do to her. Shortly after that he went missing, never to be seen or heard from again. We always kind of laughed and joked that one of her friends must have threatened him or ran him out of town. We would even go as far to say someone might have killed him for her. It wasn't until we were going through her boxes of photos and love letters we realized she was actually friends with the Cray twins. A relative tried to poison one of their guests. Once I learned about it, it finally sealed the deal for me and forever changed my view on them. They were bonkers anyway, but good lord, that's too much. My uncle's family claimed he had polio instead of a hereditary crippling disease. His wife figured it out when she went to their family reunion. She already had one child and was pregnant with another. My father tried to kill my mother while she was pregnant with me. Well, my family is mega ducked as it is. Sister's living in a crack house on heroin. Brother and his wife are addicted to meth and coke. The other 3 siblings are all on coke. I'm literally the only one of us that saw that behavior and was like, yeah, not for me. Good for you. It can be hard to break away from family dysfunction. A great uncle went to prison for statutory rape. It only takes a few minutes around him to know he's disgusting. Oof. My mom saw her friend die in front of her because of a bus. My mom even said that she saw her intestines coming out of her mouth. Mind you, my mom was I think 9 or 10 years old at the moment. After she told me about that, I never questioned her again about her past because who knows what else she went through. I may think she is problematic, but seeing her sad is not my goal at all, and I felt terrible for her and for the kid. My great grandpa was part of the Nazis and killed Jews. He did believe that it was right. He died during a transport of prisoners of war from some illness. Justified. He was an awful person. My grandmother's brother was a guard in Auschwitz. That was tough to find out. A cousin confided in me a month ago that she was molested by my grandfather when we were kids. She even told me that I was there with her when this was happening, and I somehow don't remember anything about it. I hope he's burning in hell for it. Is it just me, or all of these posts hard to read? There is strong debate in our family as to whether my aunt fell out of the window of her flat, whether she jumped or was pushed. She survived, but with brain damage, and says she can't remember. 1990. I'm 5 years old. I'm at my dad's house after he left for 4 months to Tennessee. He frequently did that because he supposedly loved the state. My mom is watching America's Most Wanted, and a segment involved a man in Tennessee being murdered with a police sketch of the last person to see the victim alive. The sketch was an exact image of my dad. Supposedly a mutual friend of my parents went to the local police department on other business, and the deputy asks, "Hey, have you seen Rich lately?" The friend responded, "Sure. Couple weeks ago I saw him downtown." They insisted if he's seen, they needed to talk to him. If he did do it, he's an extremely good liar because he was never brought on charges to my knowledge. I've been estranged from him since I was 8. My dad has a brother who I've never met, and I didn't even know about his existence until a few years ago. I asked my parents why nobody from the family talks about him and why haven't they invite him to us, but they said just because. And then we had other relatives over at our house and I heard them talking about him, and it turns out the guy is a criminal and he spent almost all his life in prison, but the worst thing he did is that he was molesting his own daughter. Or at least he was accused with it. but my mother and also the half of the extended family believes till this day that his daughter just made it up for attention. This will probably get lost, but here's my story. Had some family move to Vegas with a local church's money, close to $1 million, to open a new church for them in Sin City. They gambled it all away. Came back, church told them to duck off basically. They started their own church that allowed them to buy multi-million-dollar houses, brand new cars for them and their kids. Basically a luxury lifestyle. They sell merch at the front door to the church. Members are required to provide bank info and they tithe 10% monthly income from all families. If you don't pay up, they kick you out. They tell you how to eat and exercise. If you don't follow, they kick you out. They put it in an old movie theater so they have multiple stages, full lighting and ad crews. They do love offerings when they need extra cash. God tells them to take trips. Like told their congregation God told them to ride motorcycles through the Grand Canyon. He even claimed he had healing powers for a short amount of time and got some tattooed down his arm. The whole 9 yards. At the beginning of the pandemic when they were shutting everything down, they pressured their congregation to pay the 10% for the whole year up front. They've cut contact with all our family because we won't be part of their church. Also, their church is well known in our city and local area, but no one has stepped in, cause, you know, Bible Belt. My cousin started a cult. My dad's friend committed suicide by shooting himself in the head in front of my dad and some other friends when he was 15 years old. They were all hanging out at the friend's house having a good time. When he went upstairs, grabbed his father's pistol, and came back down calling everyone's attention. He then put the gun to his head, squeezed the trigger, and collapsed behind a couch. They all thought it was some sort of sick joke at first, until they looked over the couch and saw his body in the blood. I first heard this story from my mom when I was 18, which explained some of my dad's behavior towards toy guns when I was a kid, but I never brought it up to him. I just hoped that one day he would open up to me about, and eventually he did, but we haven't talked about it since then. I'm amazed how my dad turned out to be such a great man, having to experience something awful like that at such a young age, but according to him it's something that never left him either. He still has nightmares about it and gets really uneasy in movies and TV shows when they show someone getting shot in the head. My parents told us they were married in secret until they found out my mom was expecting, and then they told their families. It later came to light that they married on the day they found out my mom was pregnant and lied to their parents and us, but that wasn't the doozy. My father was an only child and his parents absolutely idolized him. They were very strict Catholics and very strict with my dad, never allowing him to play sports because they feared losing him or whatnot. My paternal grandmother had like 5 miscarriages. Anyway, after my dad's parents passed, he was going through their documents and he learned they had to get married too. Their wedding license was dated 2 months after the date he had always been told. I know it's not a very dark secret, just a very Catholic secret in a very Catholic family. When I was growing up, my grandfather hated anything Russian. If there were any news about them, he turned off the TV. If they played against any other team in hockey or so, he didn't watch it, even though he loved ice hockey and it was a World Cup final. I was a kid, I didn't understand why. To me, he was a retired carpenter and grandfather. When he passed away, my uncle told me everything. How he served as a foreign volunteer for Finland in the Winter War against Soviet. My great grandfather was from Finland. How his friend were taken as a POW and executed. He then went back to Finland for the continuation war where he was wounded and almost died in the Battle of Ilomantsi, the last big battle. Great uncle was a hitman for an organized crime entity. At his house, the window shutters were always closed. Prostitutes would often visit. Gave a lot to the church. Growing up, it was absolutely forbidden to even say hello to him despite him living within a stone's throw away from my grandfather's house. Thank you, kind stranger, for the award. Don't know what you're supposed to do with these things though. Can donate it to a charity or something on your behalf? My grandfather, who I never met, was in a cult and him and his friends sexually abused my father and uncles. The weird thing is my father gave me his first name for my middle name. I've always thought it was the Stockholm Syndrome that made my father name me after his pervert and demented dad. I am legally changing my name on my next birthday. My father has never been a normal person. Supposedly, according to my uncle, he got the worst of the abuse, which I accredit to his messed up childhood. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.